Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I am your host, Lauren Mignot, CEO of the experience agency D Flash. Each week, I bring on a different person from business who's doing some game-changing work, and this episode is no different. I'm so excited to have Nina Collins, who's a founder and entrepreneur, who's doing some really incredible work that's super timely in the moment we're in right now. In the US. And I think everyone needs to hear her message. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. Take a listen. Hey, Nina.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome. So glad to have you here. So even though we're under the weirdest circumstances ever, where we're not face to face having a cocktail, instead we're doing this via Zoom. The podcast doesn't change, and the first question still remains the same. So, Nina, what was your first job?
All right, so when you ask people this, do they really go to their very first job? Is that really the question? Or should I say my first professional job?
It really runs the gamut. I will say that the reason I always ask this question is because it is fascinating to see that whichever job kind of pops into my guest's head always correlates in some way, shape, or form with what they're currently doing. And so it's a bit of an unusual tack that has happened in every episode, 150 odd episodes later. So yeah.
Okay, it's a great question. I want to start asking it of everyone I know. I love it. I'm going to go with my first real job, but I do want to preface it with saying that I've worked since I was 12. So I did a number of babysitting, waitressing, telemarketing, cleaning. I had a little cleaning service when I was in high school, so I worked all from middle school up. But my first job, I graduated a little early from Barnard when I was 20 years old. I had gone to college early, and I spoke some German because I had spent a summer and then a year in Vienna during college. I had a Viennese boyfriend, and I was working as a kind of housekeeper / administrative assistant for a guy named David Shaw, who went on to create the first hedge fund ever. And there was someone at David's office who said to me one day, it was my senior year of college, and he said, "What are you going to do after college?" And I said, "I haven't figured it out yet." And he said, "I know someone who needs someone who speaks German, and you seem to be a big reader, and it's in publishing. Go meet this woman." And so I went and had an interview in a pink painted office off of Herald Square. This woman was pregnant. Her name was Jutta Klein, and she was pregnant and smoking. She was right now.
Oh my God.
Smoking a cigarette in this funky little office. The walls were literally painted Pepto-Bismol pink, and there were stacks of manuscripts everywhere, all over this office. And she turned out to have this really obscure job. She was what's called a literary scout, representing European publishers. Her biggest client was Bertelsmann, and she represented the Bertelsmann, the main publishing house in Germany, but also the book clubs in Portugal, France, all over Europe, Holland. And the job was to get to know the American book publishing scene and report on it to the European clients to help facilitate the purchase of translation rights. So I was scouting books in America to be published in Dutch, Spanish, French, etc. And she hired me and really took a leap of faith. She discovered a few days in that I actually didn't know how to type. And she was kind of disappointed. But it started a whole career in
Whoops.
Yeah. She came up to me and she said, I thought you knew how to type. And I said, "No, you didn't ask me in the interview." But yes, that was my first real job as a scout for Jutta Klein when I was 20 years old.
Amazing. Okay, so kind of obscure, but it set you off on a really unique and fascinating career journey. So how do you go from hanging out with Jutta while she's pregnant and smoking, which the idea of that just sounds insane to me.
It was a different era. I'm 50
different era.
So this was 30 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what a difference, 4 years makes. And everyone's like, "Oh, well, yeah, totally different." And from there, how did you get to where you are right now? What's that journey been like?
Well, so I worked in book publishing for about 18 years, from 20 to 38, and I was quite entrepreneurial. So I worked for Jutta for a couple years. Then I briefly had a job at a publishing house at St. Martin's Press as the foreign rights manager. And I At Utah it was a small office. It was like 4 women in this office, and it was a kind of situation where I really got to do everything. I ended up really dealing with the clients, and she gave me a lot of freedom because I was really into it and kind of super ambitious. And I kept thinking, oh, it'll be more intellectual somehow, or somehow more interesting to work at a publishing house. I had these kind of fantasies that, I don't know, I'd be surrounded by, I don't really know what I thought. So I went off and got a job as the foreign rights manager at a publishing house, and was then super disappointed, having gone from a small office where I could kind of do everything to a publishing house where I was really more of like a cog in a wheel. I actually felt really limited and kind of bored by that job. And so I spent a year there, and at the end of the year, I got married, and actually I got pregnant all in the same month in May of 1993. I decided to leave St. Martin's Press and start my own scouting company, start a company like what Utah did. I wrote a bunch of, it was like the days, before email, there were still telexes when I was at Utah, so it makes me sound like a dinosaur. But I had one of those old Mac computers that was like a big box, and I remember sitting on it at home writing letters. I basically wrote a bunch of letters to publishers abroad who didn't have scouts. Like an obscure Dutch publisher was my first client, and he wrote me back and said, yeah, I think he must have faxed me back, and he said, sure, I'll pay you $1,000 a month to be my New York office. And that was how I started.
Wow.
And I ended up building a pretty big company in my 20s as a scout. I ended up later representing Bertelsmann and Santillana and kind of huge publishers around Europe. And also then the LA Film Company got in on the scouting scene, and they started hiring foreign scouts to represent them. So I represented Scott Rudin and MGM, kind of the same idea, reporting on book properties to be made into film or TV. So I did that all through my 20s, and I ended up having like 16 clients and 5 or 6 employees, and we had this little office on Prince and Broadway in Soho. It was a very fun, glamorous job for a young woman in her 20s in New York.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it was because really the job was very much about basically being social and being a really good networker and a good kind of fast reporter. Like, you had to know if a book sold to Random House for $200,000, you had to know that day who sold it, what it was about, could I get my hands on the proposal? So it was super networky. How do I, FedEx it to Germany and get my Germans to buy it before someone else's Germans buy it? So I did that all through my 20s, and then I quit. Actually, I had twins, and I didn't quit because of the babies, although some people probably thought I did. I really was kind of bored. Like, I had built up, I like change, and I had built this business, and suddenly I was like 28, 29 years old, and I thought, God, am I going to do this forever? Like, is this it? Is this my life? Yeah. And I just felt like, God, there has to be other stuff. And also, I guess also scouting was very, it was like a really quick turnaround, right? I'd read a book, report on it. It was always on to the next one. And I thought maybe I should do something where I have a more kind of in-depth relationship with books. So I shut down the agency. I gave all my clients and my employees 6 months notice and said, I'm going to move on. I'm going to take some time off and move on. And I took 2 years off, and I had really not worked ever in my life. I mean, I'd really been working since I was like 12, and in various ways. And at the time I was then married, and I had 3 little kids, and my husband said, take some time off. And so I spent 2 years like reading the newspaper in Starbucks every day and hanging out with the kids and thinking about what I wanted to do. And I ended up then deciding to build a literary agency. So different from scouting, a literary agent, as I'm sure you know, is someone who represents authors and sells their books to publishing houses and helps develop the project. So I found a partner, a guy named David McCormick, who I thought would be a really great partner. He had been an editor at the New Yorker, and I just thought he added, like, I kind of had a lot of connections in publishing, but had never agented and had never really edited work, and he had done those things. And David and I formed an agency and called it Collins McCormick. And I did that kind of all through my 30s, or well into my 30s. We kind of created an agency and started selling books, and it was actually also quite successful. He was very talented, and I knew a lot of people, and it worked. Although midway through my 30s, I ended up getting divorced and was pretty depressed and kind of decided that I wanted to maybe get out of publishing altogether. So David and I split up. He went off on his own. He still has an agency. I think it's called McCormick Williams. I kept mine kind of limping along for a couple of years, calling it Collins Literary, but I kind of knew that I wanted a change and wanted to get out of publishing altogether. So at this point, it's my late 30s. I started writing a little bit for the first time in my life. My mother had been a writer, and I had never really felt the courage to write, or like I really had a story to tell. And I started writing for Huffington Post and a little bit of magazine stuff. I wrote a piece for Vogue and a piece for Elle. So I kind of started exploring my voice a little. And then I came across this graduate program at Columbia. I had always slightly regretted that I had not gotten an advanced degree. And I heard about this program in narrative medicine at Columbia, which I was looking into, like, should I become a therapist? Should I get an MBA? But this program just really spoke to me, and it's super obscure. It's kind of it's a very new study, and it's the only program is at Columbia, although there are programs in Europe about it. But it's essentially the study of how we tell our stories of illness and death. It's kind of the idea of using close reading to think about how we tell our own personal narratives, but really in the context of loss, essentially. And I know that sounds really weird. I was interested in it in large part because my mom had died when I was a teenager of a cancer that she had kept a secret. And I had kind of really been plagued for a long time with her loss. And in the wake of my divorce, I kind of basically decided I'm leaving book publishing. I can afford to take a few years off. I'm going to go to graduate school and explore this subject that really interests me.
Wow.
And so I did that. And I also, while I was doing it, I did a life coaching certificate course with a company called IPEC, which I was kind of, because as I said, I had kind of been thinking, do I want to become a therapist? And so I was interested in what coaching is all about. So during those couple of years I did that graduate program, I thought that what I might want to become is a death doula or a divorce doula or a divorce coach. I was really interested. I've kind of always been super interested in women's lives. I went to Barnard. I didn't major in women's studies, but I almost did. I ended up majoring in German. But I've always been very preoccupied with kind of women's stories and loss, as I said. So I thought like maybe I would become some sort of coach in that field. And then basically is really where you get to the heart of the now part of the story. So I was at this point, I guess I finished my graduate program. I got a consulting job that I did for a couple of years at a hospital in Brooklyn, where I was called a narrative medicine consultant. And I built an empathy curriculum for the medicine residents and did special projects around the hospital. I worked with like ambulatory nurses. I did a project in the OBGYN department in surgery. And it was basically projects around communication in healthcare, kind of how we talk to each other in the context of illness. And I also was a hospice volunteer at a hospice up in the Bronx. And I was a volunteer at Lenox Hill Hospital. And I did a bit of a Buddhist chaplaincy program. So I was really kind of immersing myself in all these ideas around loss. And around this time, I was 45 or so, and my body was kind of changing, and I was starting to not sleep well. And I realized, I don't know how old you are, but I realized I was on the verge of perimenopause, which is, that period in a woman's life where she's kind of sliding into menopause. Your period starts getting irregular, you start having various symptoms. And I realized that I had no idea what menopause was about. My mom had died when I was 19. She never went through menopause. Most of my girlfriends, my close girlfriends, of which I have a lot, are older than I am because I had kids very young. And, in New York particularly, you really make friends probably everywhere.
With the moms.
With your mom, exactly. So when I had my first kid at 24, most of my friends are like 5 to 10 years older than I am. And I was like, why the hell has no one explained to me that I'm going to get back fat and that I'm going to start having all these chin hairs and that I'm not going to sleep? Why has no one talked to me about menopause? And so I created this Facebook group really just to talk to my girlfriends about it. And I called it "What Would Virginia Woolf Do," which was kind of an inside joke. Virginia Woolf, for listeners who don't know, is a major feminist British writer who killed herself in her late 50s. She was actually, she actually had real mental illness, and I'm not trying to make fun of mental illness. It was just an inside joke because I didn't think I was starting a business. I really thought I just wanted to talk to my girlfriends about aging in a kind of like self-deprecating, honest, funny way. And I didn't want to do it on my regular Facebook page, but I was someone who enjoyed Facebook, like a lot of middle-aged women. And so I just like created this group. It was kind of when groups were just starting on Facebook. It was almost 5 years ago now in October. And the group became super, super popular. It just kind of took off in a very unexpected way. It was a secret group. So women had to invite, the only way you found out about it is if someone sent you an invitation. And, I started it with like 40 of my closest girlfriends in Brooklyn, and it just grew. And it ended up over the next 3 years becoming, growing to 32,000 women around the country and really around the world. And it became like this super funny, addictive place where like kind of smart, like-minded women would go on and talk about everything from like their erratic periods to erectile dysfunction to dealing with difficult teenagers to what books they were reading to their feelings about race or politics or eyeliner, like just kind of a smart girl club, to where to stay in Paris when you're going away for the week or, and it was a very interesting experience for me because as I've explained, I'm naturally entrepreneurial. I've pretty much only ever worked for myself aside from the first, 3 years of my career. I mean, at the hospital, I was working for the hospital, but I was a consultant, so I would kind of come and go. And I really like building businesses, but I really did not see this as a business. I was like, this is a lot of women chit-chatting, and I love the conversation, and I think it's really funny and interesting, and I've clearly tapped into a need. But I didn't immediately see, still don't in a lot of ways, see exactly how I was going to turn it into a full-time job. And yet I was spending all my time on it. It became super, super compelling. And so I started naturally, kind of organically doing, I decided to write a book. I thought, well, if I write a book, that'll kind of at least legitimize all the time I'm spending on Facebook without me feeling like a crazy person,
Because you're on there all the time. I get you.
All day long. So I wanted to be able to say to my family, like, I'm doing something legitimate, So and it was kind of easy to see what the subjects were. So I ended up writing a book. I called it "What Would Virginia Woolf Do?" and Other Questions I Ask Myself as I Attempt to Age Without Apology, which is way too long a title. But it was kind of like a funny, sexy, kind of the tone of the community, kind of part memoir, part just really helpful, organized by like, sex, beauty, kids, work, kind of all the subjects we covered in the community. And then my friend, we started creating all these subgroups because as the group got really big, it was no longer good. Like you couldn't just post and be like, I'm going to Paris tomorrow, because it would just like, it would clog up the feed. So we created Woolfer Travel. We created a Woolfer Money group. We created Woolfer Parenting. So by the time I left Facebook, which we did last fall, we had 37 subgroups on Facebook, and we had,
wow,
I think 85 moderators. So I had 15 moderators of the main group, but then we had volunteer moderators of all the subgroups. All of this just a labor of love. So about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I decided, like after my book came out, I'd started doing a podcast called Raging Gracefully with one of the moderators, my friend Hillary Richard. So we'd kind of created very organically this whole universe, right? There was a podcast and a book, and we were having live events. We were having clothing swaps and trips to sex toy shops and all sorts of stuff. It was
also my favorite things.
Yeah, exactly. What else? Cocktail parties, all sorts of fun things. And women were making so many friends. And at one point I drove across country and I would post in the group and I'd be like, I'm going to be in Memphis tomorrow. And I would literally go to a bar and meet like 6 Woolfers in Memphis. And they started calling themselves Woolfers, by the way. That wasn't me. That was their thing. So I finally was like, okay, I need to hire an assistant, and I need to figure out how to monetize this. I need to hire someone smart and young and digitally savvy, and we have to figure this out. And so I hired this lovely young woman, Sydney, who was a graduate of NYU and was a stand-up comic, and her, that's her career goal, but she needed to make a living, and she thought this sounded interesting. She's 26. She's the same age as my oldest daughter. And Sydney and I spent like a year while we were still on Facebook really trying to figure out, could we get people to pay us for sponsored content? Like, could we write stuff for bra companies, and could we sell bras, or could we have events? And we kind of explored all these ways. And also I spent a lot of time thinking, like, what is this? And why do I love it so much? And it's kind of to your original point about like everything kind of coming together and making sense. It was, for starters, the most organic professional experience of my entire life. Like, it still is. Like, I can't believe how it kind of has a life of its own. Like, it doesn't let me go, and it keeps kind of evolving the community. But it's also, when I look at my background in book publishing and narrative medicine and women's stories, like all the volunteer work I've ever done in my life has been around mentoring with young girls. I realized that this community is really kind of a culmination of everything I've ever done and really been interested in. And so it has felt very hard to walk away from. And I can really see the service we're doing. Like, we've helped women have better sex and feel more understood and more normal. And so anyway, so then Sydney and I were like, okay, we decided that what this really is it's a club. Like, I'm not trying to, like, if I were a life coach, it would have actually really made sense. If I were trying to make a living as a life coach, it would have made sense to stay on Facebook and just try and get clients. But I really wasn't trying to do that. I really wanted to nurture this space for these women. So we finally, last spring, decided we were going to leave Facebook, that we were basically felt like we were working for Zuckerberg and not making any money. And they were like making all this money, aiming all this, advertising at us. And we also thought Facebook was kind of soul sucking and,
Yep.
they steal your information and all that stuff. And we knew it was a huge risk. Like, people said, if you leave Facebook, when you go from something free to something paid, you're going to lose almost all your users. And I went into it knowing that would happen, and basically said, I'd rather we were small and more intentional, and we're just going to leave Facebook. So we hired a company. We did a lot of research. We hired a company called Top Fan, and we built an app. And it was hugely, I have to say, brave, because it really could have, completely failed, and it still may, to be honest. We're struggling, but everyone said you'll be very lucky to get 10% of your users. And we announced last October 2019, that we were creating an app, that we were going to move to a subscription-based model, that we were really a club, a community at heart, and we needed people to pay dues. It's $35 a year. We're often running a special that's $20 a year, and we felt like that was really very affordable. There are a lot of women's communities, obviously networking communities and things that are much, much more. And we really see the value women get every day, and advice and friendship and all that. So we made the announcement, and we got a little over 10%, really almost 20%. We initially got around 3,000 women, and now we're up to just under 5,000 women who are paid members of the community. And
congratulations, that's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's been a very interesting journey. I mean, one of the things we did wrong, or that was just hard to do, is building an app is hard. So when we launched the app in October, there were a lot of technical issues with it. It really was very beta. Now, 6 or 8 months later, we have a very good product that we feel really good about, but we're so grateful to the members who came with us and were patient, because Facebook is Facebook for a reason, and building an app and building a community, there are just a lot of features. It was just really challenging. Good for my aging brain to learn how to do this, but definitely challenging. And so now our business model, so now we changed the name of the community. So now I run a community called the Woolfer, because What Would Virginia Woolf Do was just too long, and no one understood, what it was. And it really is the way we describe it, it's kind of the social platform for women over 40. And we have a website, and we have the website content is all free, so you can go on to the woolfer.com, Woolfer's 2 O's, and read. We create tons of content every week, and actually our content has really changed during COVID in actually a very good way. So we have all this free content, but then you'll see on the website there's a button that says community, and to enter the community, to have the private conversations a la Facebook, you hit a paywall and you have to become a member. And then we have live, of course, we used to have live events before COVID. Now we have a lot of Zoom events, which has actually turned out to be a really great idea. And I'm surprised, I don't know why we didn't think of it before. So like we've been running a 30-day unlearning racism class every day at noon. That's been really kind of life-changing. It's been a super good experience. I've been co-facilitating it with one of my white, so I'm biracial. My mom was Black, my dad was white. So I consider I'm Black. I've always considered myself Black. Sherry, one of the women who runs it with me, is white in LA. I'm in New York. So she and I have been co-facilitating this. And then we do things, we like to say we're kind of high and low. Like we have a sex conversation every Monday night that anyone can join. We have a gardening conversation every 2 weeks that I don't go to because I don't garden, but lots of women are really enjoying it. We talk about politics, we talk about books, we have a book club meeting once a month. It's a group of smart women. One really good statistic I always love to bring out is that over half the women in our community have master's degrees or above, which is just cool. So when you go on these calls, you're talking to women who are just super interesting and have a lot of experience and know a lot but there's also a really lovely kind of frankness to the community and non-elitism to the community. Like we're very down to earth. We once had a very popular car thread back when we were on Facebook, and I was really kind of heartened and surprised to learn that the favorite car in our community is the Subaru Outback.
Really? Oh, I have heard about this, about why the Subaru is like a favorite among moms. In my mind, that's terrifying, but I understand how some folks could love it.
Subaru is a great car, I have to say. I mean, our women are all over the map, but I think it nicely embodies our slightly kind of, people drive all sorts of, fancy, less fancy, but we are really like a bunch of very down-to-earth people. Some women get plastic surgery. And it's also quite non-judgmental. Like it's a space where women can come and really be honest. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I talked forever, but that is my entire career.
No worries, it's a great story. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin with my first thought is I know so many women who I'm going to send to Woolfer because this is exactly what I've been hearing from a number of women that I know. So full disclosure, I just turned 40, so I'm technically not your demographic. I have 8 more months, I guess, until I will be.
That's fine. You're welcome in. We always make exceptions, but yes, the rule is you have to be a woman and you have to be over 40 to join the community. But we'll let you in.
Cool. Okay, so all right, so I can get in, awesome. But I just think, thank you for creating that, because I feel like I've interviewed lots of female executives who are over 40, a lot of them who are working moms, and a lot of these themes always kind of come up like, how do I talk to other women about this? Because like it's funny, like similarly, I kind of skew older in terms of my friend group. Yeah, I haven't gotten married or had kids yet, but I'm kind of an old soul, so for as long as I can remember, I've always had female friends who are 5, 10, sometimes 15 years older than me. And so I've gotten a window into a different side of the world a lot earlier than my friends who are my age and younger. And this conversation, literally, I had with a good girlfriend of mine a couple of years ago when she was about to go through menopause. And she's like, I can't really talk to you about this, Laura. You're my brunch buddy who we get drunk with, but like, you know nothing about like what these hot flashes are. And I'm like, yeah, I really can't help you here. So I think what you're doing is phenomenal and so very necessary, and good on you and doing the paywall, because like this is not charity, this is life.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that women undervalue, I mean, it's been tricky.
Do not.
Right. I mean, a lot of people say to me, well, you've done so much good and you should just be so happy that you've done so much good. And and I am, and I've met amazing women, but it costs me money. Like, we're still like this year, my accountant just told me this, I was like $36,000 in the hole this year for it. So it's like, okay, we have one paid employee and she should get paid, but there are a lot of us working on it for free, and we need to turn it around. So yeah, and we may well do it. Subscription. Honestly, we have 5,000 subscribers. If we had 10,000 or 15,000, we'd actually be fine, and we'd be able to get more. We have some advertisers, very specific only brands that we really think are great, and we'd be able to get more and better if we had more members. So it's the challenge is getting more subscribers, because people are like, It's hard to learn a new technology, and Facebook is free. So it's just hard to get people to know that they're missing something until they try it out. The women who are in there really, really love it. So that's our challenge.
So I have so many friends to send your way. Do you know the women at Luminary and Elevate? Because on Connect Four,
I don't know. I know Elevate, but I don't know them, and I don't know Connect Four. I'm taking notes right now. Yeah, we're constantly, I think the real strategy that we've decided makes the most sense is to partner with like-minded groups, particularly like-minded groups that need community. So for example, we're talking right now to a telemed company. You know, telemed for menopause is kind of a new trend. And it's actually been helped by COVID, because now suddenly the idea of doing telemedicine is familiar to everyone. And
no longer freaked out.
it's a good subject for menopause, because you don't need to go in and see your doctor. What you need is someone who really knows what they're doing to talk to you about menopause treatment. And most doctors really don't. It's like shocking. The number of OBGYNs who get special training in older female health is really, really low. So for a lot of women, particularly if you live in like Omaha or wherever, some, you know, northern Maine, it's going to be very hard for you to get a doctor who can actually help you with the symptoms of menopause. So telemed for menopause is a great idea. And there are like 5 or 6 companies out there who are trying to really corner this market. And they all, of course, want community, but they're not in the business of community. They're in the business of telemedicine. So we're trying to partner with one of those companies to say, like, what if every time you got a new member, she got a subscription to the Woolfer? Because those are the women we want, right? We want women over 40 who are smart and thinking about their health and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, partnering with the right kind of awesome female brands is really, I think, the way to go.
So, oh, girl, I got you. I will absolutely help on that side of the universe, because, like I said, it's necessary and needed, and integral. But also, it's also kind of the important story for folks to hear about the fact that, you know, in this very unique world, not everything has to revolve around Facebook, and that you can actually build something on your own. Because I think, you know, as you know, a lot of advertisers are trying to quote unquote move away from Facebook for a bit because of some of their practices. And as folks are trying to figure out, like, in this unusual set of circumstances that we're currently in with regard to the pandemic and racial unrest, where else can I go to get information? You know, independently owned and curated and vetted programs and communities are going to be where people go. Because, you know, frankly, for me, for Facebook, I'm 95% of the stuff I do is in the private groups that I'm a part of, and that's the reason I keep Facebook.
Yep.
Because really, those communities that I'm a part of, a lot of them are mostly women. A lot of them are like Black women in business. Because there are folks who I would never normally meet, but for this group, because we're all in different places, and so there's a value to me there.
Yeah.
But I really
agree. I mean, it was actually interesting when I started the group initially, and it was secret, right? It was just women who knew each other. And I finally, I think 6 months in, I announced, I'm going to make this closed, which means that other people can find it. They still have to ask to join, but strangers can find it. And I actually got some pushback. And I said, the reason I'm doing this is, like, this group has been so interesting. But imagine the women in Oklahoma who are like us. Like, there's so many stories we haven't heard yet. Like, we don't want to just be a bunch of, you know, Brooklyn, LA women talking to each other. Let's open it up. And I agree. I've met amazing women, like, really from all over the world. So, and I'm grateful to Facebook for having helped us do that. So I hear you.
So we got lots to talk about. So it's an interesting. I mean, there's so many things I could go back to, but I'm fascinated because as someone who, you know, mother really wanted her to be in medicine, but I'm terrified of the sight of blood. So it was never going to be for me. How did you end up working at the hospitals and doing narrative medicine? Because, like, for me, I'm like, wait, hold on. so
yeah,
tell me about that experience.
Yeah, it is kind of funny, actually. I really do think that, like, I'm not a science person per se at all. I really was motivated by thinking about, so my mom's name was Kathleen Collins, and she's the first Black woman to make a feature film in America. She was an artist and a filmmaker. She made a film called Losing Ground that has recently been released. But she had breast cancer throughout my childhood, which she kept a secret. And when I was 2 weeks after I turned 19. I was living in Vienna, and she called me and said, I'm sick and I need you to come home. And it turned out she had cancer, or she was finally telling us that she had cancer, and then she died 2 weeks later. And it was super traumatic for me. She was my only real parent. My parents had been long divorced, and she was really like a strong, charismatic, amazing, interesting woman. And it was just like life shattering. And I basically was kind of consumed with wondering what that experience had been like for her, why she had chosen to keep it a secret. I was really just interested in honestly thinking about death and the experience of death and how we handle death in our culture and how we don't talk about it so directly. So that's what led me to the narrative medicine program. And then in it, I got really interested in the idea of helping people manage loss better. Like, life is loss. I had gone through a very difficult divorce, which had been super painful in my 30s. And I really felt that my life had been kind of defined by these big losses. And I was interested in ideas about resilience and how do we, there's a new book that actually just came out a couple days ago by a friend of mine named Bruce Feiler called, I think, Life is in the Transitions. And I was really interested in that idea of like how we deal with transition. So how I got a job at the hospital was really a relationship thing. I have a friend, I'm on the board of the Brooklyn Public Library, and I had a friend on that board who is married to a woman named Pam Breyer, who's a really unusual woman. She's in her mid to late 70s now, and she ran this gigantic hospital. She ran Bellevue in New York, and then she went to Maimonides, this big public hospital in Borough Park, Brooklyn. And Pam was interested in narrative medicine because she's interested in general and kind of communication. And was an amazing leader at the hospital. And narrative medicine was becoming kind of trendy. And so she heard me talking about it at a cocktail party, and she said, come talk to me. We'd like to bring some of this into the hospital. So I got very, very lucky. So she hired me. I was there for 2.5 years, and it was a really great position because I was kind of a special consultant to her, to the president of the hospital. And I would get sent off on these missions, but I had kind of great access. Like I had exposure to all the divisions of the hospital, and I really got to kind of work where it was most interesting to me. So I worked with the palliative care department. And I really loved it as an exposure to, like, doctors really are just very, very smart, and they're always learning, and it's super interesting. And the idea of kind of communicating with people at the most intimate, scared moments of their lives was very interesting to me. I ultimately decided that I didn't really want to become a hospital administrator, and the field of narrative medicine doesn't really exist. Like, I got very lucky to get a job, but it's pretty hard to build a job in that area, mostly because there's so many problems in healthcare, and communication is certainly one of them, but it's probably not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is our whole system. So I basically decided I didn't really want to become a hospital administrator, and I didn't feel like this was really an area where I could grow that much. And then I started this group and got kind of more interested in the idea of helping women in midlife and women aging and women transitioning. So I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. So fascinating. And I mean, I can talk to you for hours. So one of the things I also read recently is that we're at this really unusual time where, the land of Amy Cooper and Karen and Becky are kind of getting their bit of their comeuppance. And you started this little talk series where you're kind of helping white women figure out to be better. What prompted you to do that, and how's that been going for you? Really?
Yeah, it's been super interesting. So our community has always been diverse. We've always had a decent number of Black women and Asian women, not enough Latina women. We've had a lot of gay women and women up into their 70s and 80s, so all over the map. And I'd say fairly economically diverse, although, very educated and a little bit more coastal. So, so we have all that mixed in there. When we left Facebook, what I found was that the community became a teeny bit richer and a teeny bit whiter. And so it's been a concern of mine from the beginning. Like, we left Facebook, October, November, and I've been aware from the start that I need to make sure, basically the way I describe it is, it's only interesting for me to run the community if it's interesting to me, right? So I need people who represent all walks of life and my life as well. And because I'm mixed race, I think I mean, I grew up with a Black mother. I've always described myself as Black, but I have a lot of white friends as well. And I've been married to 2 white men. My kids are mixed race. So I do feel like I understand kind of both sides of the coin, so to speak, quite well. And when the unrest started during COVID, obviously everyone was super freaked out. And what ended up happening actually was a white woman in our community from LA, a woman named Karen Rappaport, wrote to me one day and she said, have you heard of Rachel Cargle? I'm wondering if we could consider doing the Great Unlearn in the community. I had heard of Rachel Cargle, but didn't know about the Great Unlearn. So I looked her up. She has this 30-day course called Do the Work, the Great Unlearn, where she basically recommends a little bit of homework every day. You read a couple things, you watch a couple things, and then you discuss. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. I spoke to Sherry, who was one of my white colleagues, who also seemed really up for it. I have a Black colleague on our team. There are 5 of us who run the community. And one of my Black colleagues didn't want to do it, understandably, right? The whole, a lot of Black people do not want to explain racism to white people and are exhausted.
Of course.
And are in a lot of pain. So my Black colleague kind of demurred. She runs a daily writing workshop group where women just show up and write, which is great. And so she does a ton of things, but she did not want to participate in this. And I just felt kind of up for it. And I think I have a daughter who just graduated from Wesleyan, who's a real activist, very, very involved, very passionate about her racial heritage and very involved. And she had been somewhat critical of me. She felt like I was a little too complacent, that I, basically too comfortable in my privilege and I'm not really fighting the good fight enough. And I started to basically think she was right. And I feel like what she made me realize is I feel like I say a lot, well, I'm Black and I don't feel X. I mean, it's not that I wasn't outraged or that I'm not outraged, but the killing of Black people by police officers. And it's not that I don't have a lot of opinions about, knowledge of Black culture and all the rest, but I did start to realize, like, I run this community, I have a real platform, and I've always been kind of resolutely anti-political in the platform. I really wanted it to be a place where all women could come and talk about their vaginas and the books and the love lives and whatever they want to talk about. And I'm a staunch liberal. I always said about conservative women in the community, like, if you voted for Trump, you can probably still be in this community as long as you don't talk about being anti-abortion or, you don't talk about Trump. We're not going to kick you out. So the truth is, I feel like I let things slide in the interest of really wanting diversity. And I decided that it was time for me to become a little more political like everyone else. And I really felt like doing the Great Unlearn. I didn't really know actually going into it how much I'd learn, but I really felt like I wanted to make the effort. So we announced it, and we basically got around 30 women who pretty much showed up every single day for 30 days. And we had certain rules, like we really wanted people to feel like they could drop in and drop out. We didn't want people to feel embarrassed if they hadn't done the homework. We felt like it's a big learning experience and let's just dive in. And I cannot believe how committed these women were. And we had, I would say overall, the Black women in our community who I'm friends with, none of them really joined. We had like 5 or 6 Black women who I didn't really know very well, who I now know, but who kind of dipped in and dipped out. So like there was a woman who came on every day for a week, and luckily, thank God, we didn't have any Black women who felt annoyed by it or, I think they were really pretty impressed. We had an Asian woman who was there every day, a second Asian woman who came every day the last 10 days or so. We had a German woman. We had a couple mixed race people like me. There was a Black Latina women. So it was diverse, but the majority were white women. And I have to say, another thing that was super interesting to me is that there were a few white women on there who really come from really, really white backgrounds, like white backgrounds that I don't really know very well, like women who'd grown up in, like really remote places in Kansas and had never seen a white person until they were 30 or whatever. And
Jesus.
those women, yeah, I don't have any experience with people like that. And it was fascinating to have everyone be there every day and super committed. And we talked about everything from the performative aspect of the whole process to, we had one day when we talked about implicit bias and we did the Harvard implicit bias tests. And it was the one day where I encouraged people to be a little confessional. And I kind of said, the way we ran it is every day I would start by talking about my take on the homework and my personal thoughts about the day's subject. And then Sherry would do the same. And then we would open it up to conversation. So subjects were everything from racism in healthcare, racism in the criminal justice system, white privilege, cancel culture, racism in the arts. Like, it was really an amazing, amazing experience. But on the implicit bias day, I said, I think it would be helpful for those of you who are willing to talk about moments you've had of uncomfortable where you've realized your bias. And so people went around telling difficult stories, and it was very confessional. And I started to feel a little creepy about it, because then you kind of veer into that kind of white savior thing, right? Like, I'm confessing a time that I had a bad thought about a Black person, and now I'm realizing I was wrong. But then the next day,
woe is me, right?
Exactly. But then the next day we had an amazing conversation about that, about kind of white saviorism and being confessional. And there were a few moments that were uncomfortable for me. There was one moment, one day, where a white woman referred to a letter a Black woman had written at her school about the protests, and she referred to the woman as articulate. And I was like, okay. Thank God we have a community that really, we do have a lot of trust in each other. And so I was able to say, I need to interrupt you. That is an example of something you don't do. It's wrong. I'm going to explain to you why it offends me. And she took it, and she was great. And I think everyone learned that, like, like, why would you call a Black woman articulate just because she's written a good letter? But she got it. And I think there's a white woman in the group who's married to a Black man and has 2 Black daughters. She was a great participant. So she, I think, at times, at the end, I had everyone write reflective essays about the whole process and then read them. And she talked about feeling a little freaked out, like realizing on the call how few Black people some of these women even know, like, at all. But we talked about that too. Like, we had a great day on Black culture where we kind of talked about, like, what Black culture do you have in your lives, and what Black culture do you want to bring into your life? That was a really fun session, actually. It was pretty easy, right? And kind of fun to talk about. So sorry, I've probably gone on a digression, but it's been really, really interesting to me. And I've been very heartened. Like, we have a mutual friend, Wendy, who was on a lot of the calls. And I think Wendy really felt the value, because Black women do feel so apprehensive about white women in so many ways, and about calling them on their shit. It's just often, it feels not worth it. It feels so hard. It feels,
it's exhausting.
It's exhausting, right? And I think Wendy really did feel friendship, like, felt the beginnings of friendship with a lot of these women. It was really nice. We had a whole day where we talked about, the idea that white women are the most dangerous women in America, which, was like, we were a little nervous, Sherry and I, to have that day, and it went well. Like, these women really took it on in a way I was super impressed with. So we actually today was actually day 30 at noon, and we've decided we're going to continue it, but now just once a week, probably Mondays at noon, and we're just going to keep doing it. We can, we did a day on reparations, we did a day on affirmative action. We're just going to keep kind of finding new topics and digging deeper, because it's been really an amazing experience. And for me, I think it feels like both. I feel like I've dug deeper and looked at colorism and my own privilege, and but I also feel like I'm really providing a great, like, service. It's really a really helpful thing for the women who want to participate. So it makes me feel good.
Awesome. I here's why I'm always on this side. I think it's listen, learn, and act for our white friends, especially for our white women. And those who take the step to actually begin to listen and learn can then take some smart and more meaningful actions. Yeah. Yes, it's exhausting, but the other problem is that if we don't talk to them and they don't hear from us, then they're not going to get the whole story, because there's a nuance that comes from this. And what I said to a lot of my white friends is like, yes, if you have questions, you can ask me. Just know that this shit is exhausting and that I will not get back to you right away, but I will get back to you. Because similarly, like I have obviously a lot of white female friends. Oftentimes I'm their only black friend. And you know, the first thing is like, okay, remember, don't tell me you don't see color because I know what you look like. You know what I look like.
Yeah, that's
if we're in a room and you have to point to someone who looks like point out to someone who I am. I know what you're gonna say because I did the same thing to you. So like, let's start there. But I think also, I think what happens now is that the everyday occurrences, like we did this panel last week at the event that I produced called Inkwell Beach Live, and we had a conversation with like 4 white women executives, and it was called Amy, Karen, Get Becky, like come get your girls. Because like it's like not only does it have to come from the black women who are in their lives, but other white women who may have been quiet before, but now realize that their inaction or them standing on the sidelines was them being complicit in more terrible things happening.
Yeah.
And so the more that we can do where we can get these women off the sidelines of being, well, it's not me, I don't do that, versus if I see it, I will say something.
That's right.
Is the only way this moves this conversation forward. And so that when I walk into a store, I don't have a drama to deal with. Or like my brothers walk somewhere, it's not an issue. Well, you're not going to be calling to speak to a manager because you thought I raised my voice at you.
Right.
So,
right. No,
I
really think we have to have the conversations, and I fully respect people who don't want to have them, but I really think we've kind of been given a great opportunity right now. People feel, I mean, a lot of people want to have it, and we should take this chance, this moment, and make them listen, and really talk about it.
Listen, and be honest about it. Because again, it's like, why am I your only black friend? Like, what's up?
Right.
Like, you found me. I'm fun. We like to drink, like to have pizza. So there's plenty of other black women who are just like me.
That's right.
There's nothing unique here. It's like, yes, I'm fun and awesome, but still, like, there are plenty of me's around the world.
Exactly.
Put yourself in places where you can find some, because clearly you can make friends.
Yeah.
And also you can be part of communities like yours, and you can listen effectively. Like you found, like you all were talking about sex toys. You have something in common. So
exactly, a lot in common. And also, I bring this up a lot in the community because I thought it was so beautiful. Sherry, my white co-facilitator, started to cry one day. Something she read made her think about what you're missing by not having other cultures in your life, and people of different colors, and people of like all that you're missing by cutting yourself off from the world. And I just thought it was so, so obvious, right? And so real, that we're all richer for more connection and more understanding. And, but we've got to look at, what drives us apart. We have to look at it and be honest about it. Basically, I realized, like, I spend so much time, like, I'll talk about my vagina any day of the week, and I don't talk enough about racism. Like, I should. It's here. We have to talk about it.
Yeah. I think that's the key here. It's like, there are some common themes that, white women and black women can get together on. Again, like good champagne, your vagina, and a hot dude. But like, y'all won't talk about racism. Like there's something wrong here, boys and girls. If I can easily talk to you about the magic wand and how the Hitachi is better than the Lilo, then we should be talking about why Breonna Taylor as killers are not arrested yet. Like that needs to be in the same conversation.
Yeah.
It just is a thing. So I think that but I'm just so glad to hear that you've created a space where like white women feel comfortable, because the other thing is like with the crying, it gets on my damn nerves. Yeah. And so I actually started we have a whole new side of the business from my agency side with my day job, a whole culture practice. And one of the things we're doing is sort of unconscious bias training, and we call the training "Your Tears Are a Weapon."
Well, yeah, we had a whole conversation about that, the white woman and her tears. Yeah.
Because like you can get me killed.
Yeah.
And you don't realize this. And the rules of the course are you cannot cry on camera during the Zoom conference, because obviously we're all trapped behind Zoom. It's like, because the minute you start crying, it becomes about you. And the first rule of being an ally is that it is not about you.
Not about you.
So you can go on mute, get off camera, fix your face, get it together, go knock back a shot of gin, and then come back and enjoy and rejoin the course. But that kind of like, you have to face this,
Yeah.
and you can't use the things like, oh, I'm gonna start to cry and I'm gonna feel so bad, and then we'll also sit here and watch you cry and feel bad about how terrible you feel about this. Where it's like, dude, to do the reading and to hear about this is a privilege versus experiencing it. So chill.
Yeah. Oh, I want to have you come on and be a special guest.
Sure.
Good. Yeah, those are
Any
good
day,
points.
any day of the week. Guess what? I'm home and available.
Okay. All right.
So,
I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I definitely want to get you on. We'll do an interview. That'd be
um,
fun.
um, yeah. So see, vice versa. See, we trade. So as difficult and as crazy as this wild and wacky world that we're in right now is for us all, it's super stressful. So, like, what are you doing for your self care?
So my usual self-care answer, the truth is, like, I mean, I do things like yoga, but when I'm really exhausted and overwhelmed, I take to my bed. I'm like, I love my bed. And I will get into bed and close the curtains. Like, I have blackout curtains in my room, and I'll surround myself by books, and I'll light a candle, and I'll have tea or hot water with lemon, or sometimes wine, depending on, time of day or mood. But I'll go to bed for like 10 hours and like during the day, and just say like, I need to rejuvenate. So that really is my most genuine self-care thing. I also, in COVID, did a hilarious thing, which is that I ordered rollerblades, because I've been staying out of the city since March, and I was bored, and I used to be a big rollerblader when I was young. So I've been doing a lot of like nature, like I've been walking and rollerblading and biking, and really loving that. It's actually, I mean, like a lot of people, I'm not really missing Brooklyn that much, and I'm surprised. So I'd say nature is also kind of giving me self-care.
Cool. I haven't rollerbladed in so long. It was like a thing when I was a little
It
kid,
was
and I
really
remember.
fun. It was scary to get back on. I have to say, I bought knee pads and everything. I mean, I'm 50 years old. I could easily break a bone, but
Mhm.
if you were good at it before, you can probably still. I've been surprised. It's been, I mean, knock on wood. Next time you talk to me, I could have broken my leg, but
Mhm.
it's fun.
It's all, listen. I mean, I actually just bought a bike. It hasn't arrived yet. And so I did a city bike ride with a couple of friends of mine over the weekend. And even though that bike is heavy, I have to say it was just sort of nice to like not be walking somewhere and like exploring a different part of Manhattan, that I wouldn't normally get to see because like I've been walking everywhere. I haven't taken the subway because I'm like, yeah, no thanks.
Yeah,
So,
there's actually a
uh,
bike shortage, I've heard.
oh no, I bought the bike. It arrived in August.
Wow,
So I'm like, are you kidding me? This is insane.
crazy.
Um, but it is what it is. But yeah, I agree. Like, I think I think a lot of the getting the fresh air into our lungs is so necessary right now because
Yeah.
we're all in our heads, we're all in the TV, and the more that we can sort of just kind of get out and like have some quiet moments, the better off we're all gonna be.
Completely agree. It's everything. Just kind of, yeah, I agree 100%.
And so, lastly, as I told you in the beginning, that like, what I've been asking my guests in this really unique time during COVID is if they have a give and or an ask for the audience. And Nina, based on everything we've talked about, I'm assuming pretty hard that you will probably have some really good gives and asks to the audience.
All right. So the thing that comes to mind is we did one segment in our Unlearning Racism class on the idea of social capital. And at this point in our lives, like, we're mature women, we've had a lot of experiences, we know a lot of people, we've done a lot of things. You don't have to be rich or famous or anything. You have a lot under your belt. And I think the idea of social capital and of sharing it, of giving your knowledge, of using your networks, of loaning people, making connections for people, figuring out how you can help the people around you and the people you don't even know. Like, who are you going to help? So I kind of think of social capital and mentoring a lot lately. And my ask would be that you think about it too, and think about where in your life you could be pushing yourself a little further to give of your knowledge and background and connections, because we all have a lot of it.
Awesome and perfect. and exactly what I thought you'd do, something awesome. Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that we know lots of people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and we do lots of really cool things. If we forget, that's also kind of the reason why I oftentimes say this. I'll ask folks like, "Hey, like, what was your first job?" Because when you think about where you came from to where you are now,
Yeah.
it is a huge difference.
I love that
Uh,
question. Actually, we do a Woolfer of the week every week, and we have to, we ask them various questions. And I think that's what I'm going to add. It's a good one. It's super interesting to think about what people's first job was. I love it. Yeah.
because you especially for women in business, I think oftentimes we don't remark on how far we've come because we're so busy doing the work that we don't have a time to look back. Like, we're always trying to look forward. Okay, I've got to do this next thing, and this next thing, and this next thing. But taking a moment to remark on how far you've come enables you not only to give yourself a whole lot of gratitude and be thankful for where you are, but also, yeah, I'm pretty damn awesome. And
Yeah.
look how many awesome people I've come across along the way who all know me. And like, if I send them a text, they're going to respond. If I send them an email, they're going to respond.
Yeah.
So thinking about that social capital.
Yeah, and who can you help? Who is it? A friend of your, like a friend of one of your kids, or do you become a mentor with a program? Do you think about? There's so many ways we can be more generous with our time and energy if we think about it, and it would make the world a better place. So.
Absolutely. So Nina, okay, so we're pals for life now,
Yeah,
and
totally love you. This is great.
once you ever come back to New York, outdoor cocktails we must have.
Where are you? Yeah, where are you?
I'm in Tribeca.
Oh, okay, fine. We'll definitely do it. Yeah, I'm in
So
Dumbo normally, so.
oh, yeah, I'm right by the bridge. Literally, I can see the bridge from my window, so you can just like hop over.
Okay. I can't wait to meet you in person.
Likewise. But Nina, it is so delightful to have you on the show. We'll drop in the show notes links to join the Woolfer community. If you're a woman over 40 or your name is Laura Mignot, you can get into the organization and connect with really awesome women who have great opinions and are doing honest and real talk. And I think that is, as we all are home, those conversations are necessary and needed. So I encourage you all to try them out. But as I said, it was such a delight to have you on the show. Thank you
Really
so,
fun.
so very much.
Really fun to talk to you too. So we'll be in touch more going forward. Thank you, Laura.
Awesome. And that is our